Good morning, everyone. So, today we will start with the actual technical part of it. So, how to, rigorously define probability and all that stuff. So, before that, let us try to think. When you hear the word probability, what are the first things that come to your mind? Okay. So, I think when you hear the word probability, ideally, the first thing that should come to our mind is, as a mathematician or as a statistician, the first thing that should come to our mind is that it is related to some sort of sets. Okay, because when you are in BSc, what you used to define was, so you have something like probability of A, where A can be any event of interest. Okay, and when we say A is event of interest, the typical example that we used to take was, if I have say two outcomes for a coin toss as head and tail, then we used to define A as maybe just a singleton head, or maybe a singleton tail, or maybe an empty set, and so on. So basically, this is a set in which we are interested. As a result, when we say probability, we have to talk in terms of sets. So today in the beginning of our syllabus, we are going to study things related to sets and then sequences of sets. Okay. So what are the things that we know about sets? I know the concept of empty set. I also know the concept of universal set omega, right? So we can define omega as a universal set. Universal set means we say, okay, we are kind of collecting everything possible. So when I say everything possible, what do I mean by that? So for that, we need to define the concept of experiment. So what is an experiment? Of course, all of us have done some experiments in, physics, chemistry, where we go to the lab and do some experiments. In statistics, very few of us have actually done an experiment. Again, a very typical and, the example that book writers love is tossing a coin. So if you decide you are going to toss a coin, that becomes your experiment. Okay. So ideally, there are two types of experiments. One type of experiments are called as deterministic, and the other type of experiments are called as non-deterministic. Now, what do I mean by deterministic experiments? Or what do I mean by non-deterministic experiments? These are typically the experiments that we find in, physics or chemistry or any other sciences. Whereas these are the experiments that we typically find in statistics or when we are trying to study probability theory. Okay. Now what is the difference between the two? So deterministic experiments are the one in which the outcome is kind of reproducible. What do you mean by outcome being reproducible? If all of us do the same experiment, then all of us are going to get similar outcome. Or if you repeat the experiment say multiple times, you are expected to get almost the same outcome. For example, consider the experiment of say pendulum. So using pendulum, you try to decide what is the acceleration due to gravity. Of course, you are going to get slightly different answers. Instead of 9.8, you might get 9.7. But you know that the answer that you are going to get is going to be in the range of 9.8, and ideally, if everything is perfect, if all your experimental conditions are perfect, and if your recording instruments are perfect, then we are going to get the answer to be exactly equal to 9.8. Okay. So if you eliminate all possible errors, what you get is going to be 9.8. Whereas in statistics means if you toss a coin, then you know, okay, you may get head, you may get tail, but you can never say for sure that okay, on this particular coin toss I am going to get head. Okay, there is a very famous joke about this. Once a student is writing an MCQ test and the person hasn't studied at all, so what he decides was, okay, fine, I will try putting random answers. And there are two choices for every option, so he decides that okay, I will throw a coin in the air. If it's head, I will choose option A. If it's tail, I'll choose option B. And he puts he solves the entire question paper in that manner. Now there is a lot of time left because he hasn't really read the question paper, he's just simply putting heads and tails. So he decides that okay, now that I have time, I should do what my parents and what my teachers in younger years have taught me. I should check my answers. So he goes back to question 1, throws the coin again, and voila, the answer is different. So, and he goes on erasing the answers and so on. So basically, you cannot really reproduce the results of a non-deterministic experiment. Okay. Hence, that is the major difference between deterministic and non-deterministic experiments. And we are always going to be dealing with non-deterministic experiments. Okay. As a statistician, as a probabilist, we are going to be dealing with non-deterministic experiments. These are not of interest to us because everything is known. Why to study then? Okay. So when you have a non-deterministic experiments, what does it mean? You know, one thing that you know is a set of possible outcomes is known to you. Okay. So even if you may not know a particular outcome, you know what are going to be the possible outcomes. Okay. So what do I mean by that? Again, when tossing a coin, I know that outcome can be either head, tail or edge. It cannot be something other than this. Okay. So I know that outcome is going to be one of these, just that I don't know which of these is exactly going to occur. So the possible outcomes are known, but the exact outcome is always unknown. Okay. Exact outcome would always be unknown. So what to do? So we conduct the experiment and we record the outcomes. Okay. So now let me define my omega as this. So my omega is actually set of all possible outcomes. My omega is going to be set of all possible outcomes. Okay. So what we have been calling universal set so far would basically be set of all possible outcomes that are coming from the experiment that we are conducting. So the experiment can be coin toss, experiment can be throw of a dice, or experiment can be something more involved. For example, okay, coins and dice and everything is fine, but experiment can also be recording a temperature or recording rainfall. Again, what I am going to get is kind of a random answer. We have not yet formally defined random variable, so what we are going to get is some sort of random answer, but we know the range. Okay, so for example, if we are recording temperature in Pune, we know it has got to be somewhere between say 0 degrees to 50 degrees. It can never go below 0 degrees. I mean, unless there is really a catastrophic event, and it can never go above 50 degrees. In a normal scenario, the maximum possible range for temperature is 0 to 50. So everything between that becomes a possible outcome. Okay. So my omega is a set of all possible outcomes. So the universal set that we used to define, and then we have to define something called as event. So event basically is subset of omega. Okay, event basically is subset of omega. So event is a collection of some of the possible outcomes. Sometimes it may be actually equal to omega, sometimes it may be an empty set. So event is set of possible outcomes including empty thing, and then we define probability associated with each event. So probability is defined for an event, and hence probability becomes a set function because it is defined on a subset. Okay, so initially we are going to study things from set theory, and later we are going to define the actual probability. Okay, so what are the things that we know about sets? So we know what is phi, that is an empty set. Universal set we have already defined. So we now know that phi is going to be subset equal to every event set, which is going to be further subset equal to every universal set. Okay, so phi is going to be, so event is going to be some subset of omega. Okay, now given any two events or given any two sets, say a1 a2, there are a few things that I can define. So I can define union of a1 a2. Okay, so union I would denote by a1 union a2. Similarly, I can define intersection. Intersection is denoted by a1 intersection a2. Okay. Now, what is a union and what is an intersection? So, all of us actually know this, but just a revision. If I have this as my omega and this as my a1 and something like this as my a2, then a1 union a2 is basically this entire region, right? Everything that happens in either a1 or a2 or both. Okay, so we formally define union. So this is my definition of union. So we formally define union as a1 union a2 as collection of all omegas which are in capital omega such that, so omega has to be first in capital omega, then only it would come in one of these sets, such that omega belongs to a1 or omega belongs to a2 or it belongs to both. So basically I don't really need to write the last thing, because when I say or, I am going to stop or I am going to include that omega for which even one of the conditions is satisfied. Okay, so I am going to say omega belongs to omega such that omega is in a1. So if omega is in a1, of course I am going to include it. If omega is not in a1, then only I will go and check the condition for a2. If it's in a2, fine, I will include it. So this is actually a redundant part of the definition, but I have written it just to emphasize. Okay, ideally the definition should only be the first part. Okay, this is union. Similarly, we define intersection. So intersection would be defined as A1 intersection A2 as set of all those omega in omega such that such that omega belongs to A1 and omega belongs to A2. So omega must be in A1 and A2 both. Okay, then only we say that it belongs to intersection. So in terms of diagram, if I want to draw, I have this as my omega, I have this as my A1, and I have suppose this as my A2. Then this portion becomes my A1 intersection A2 because it is the region common to both of them. Okay, so we know union, we know intersection. They are kind of like sum and difference or something like that. I know about union of two sets, intersection of two sets. Ideally I would like to extend it to multiple sets. So we define union of k sets by union I going from 1 to k ai as collection of all those omegas in omega such that omega belongs to ai for at least one I. Okay, at least one I. This is our definition of union over k sets. So it is generally called as finite union. Okay, so I am taking union over ai, union over ai. So basically I am collecting all those omega which are in at least one of the ai's. Similarly, we can define finite intersection. We would denote it by intersection over ai, I going from 1 to k. So it would be defined as collection of all those omegas in omega such that now for intersection I have to say omega belongs to ai for every I going from 1 to up to k. Okay, I'm sorry. Is it okay? So this becomes my definition of finite intersection. Okay, so I have finite union, I have finite intersection, but sometimes we may not be happy with just finite. We may want to go for what is known as countable unions and countable intersections. What do I mean by that? So here I was having only k sets a1, a2, ak. So I took their union, I took their intersection. But what if I have many sets? So one set corresponding to say one natural number. So I would have countably many sets. I hope all of you remember the definition of countable and uncountable sets from real analysis. Let us try to recall. So countable sets are basically the sets which can be where you can actually count the number of elements in it. So the formal definition is countable sets are those sets from which you can define a 1-1 onto function to set of natural numbers and vice versa. Okay, so that's why from that definition, from the 1-1 onto-ness with the natural number, if I want to define a countable union or a countable intersection, it would be over the set of natural numbers. So countable union I would define as union over n greater than or equal to 1. So basically this is same as union over n belongs to set of all natural numbers. Okay, this is my notation. Because I have not taught you real analysis, I should clarify my notation. This is my notation for set of all natural numbers. Okay, it's kind of like script n. So this is again going to be same. So it is set of all omegas in omega such that omega belongs to an for at least one n. Okay, omega belongs to an for at least one n. This is known as countable union. Similarly, I can define countable intersection. So countable intersection would be union over an, n greater than or equal to 1. Sorry, not union, we are talking about intersection. So intersection over an would be set of all those omegas in omega such that omega belongs to an for every n in set of natural numbers. Okay, this is my definition of countable intersection. Okay. Okay. Now, okay, so I have defined now finite union, finite intersection, countable union, countable intersection, and of course we started with union and intersection of two sets. Okay, now with all these, let us try to have some example. Okay, so let me define A1 as say set 0, 1, 2 and A2 as say set 1, 2, 3. You can obviously write down A1 union A2, A1 intersection A2, right? A1 union A2 would be 0, 1, 2, 3. A1 intersection A2 would be the common part, that is 1, 2. The real fun starts when you deal with countable number of sets or uncountable number of sets. Even for finite, things are not at all difficult. So let me directly move on to countability. So suppose I define an as open interval 0 to 1 by n. Okay, I am defining an as open interval 0 to 1 by n, and of course this is defined for every natural number. Then I want to compute both the countable union as well as countable intersection. So the countable union would be union over all n of 0 to 1 by n. So what would this be? Let us try to think. My advice generally to people is, especially in mathematical subjects, if you are stuck, if you don't know the answer, first of all, don't panic, go step by step. Secondly, try to draw pictures. Pictures can help you a lot. Okay, so try to draw pictures. So let me see what is my A1. So if this is 0, this is say 1, my A1 is going to be entire open interval 0 to 1. Okay, my A2 by definition, by this definition, my A2 is going to be interval 0 to half. A3 is going to be interval 0 to 1 by 3. A4 is going to be interval 0 to 1 by 4 and so on. So basically my sets are kind of shrinking. The first one was the largest, the second one is half of that, the third one is 1/3 of the first one, and so on. So the sets are shrinking. So what I can observe is A1 is the biggest one, A2 is subset of that because this is A1, A2 is just this part, A3 is just this part. So the sets are shrinking. Hence union is going to be the largest of them. So I would write union as open 0 to 1. Okay. Similarly, if I want to try intersection, so intersection over an going from 1 to infinity. We generally don't write 1 to infinity, but fine, that is also one way. So again let me draw pictures. So I have 0, 1. This is my first set. Second set is 0, half, and so on. So initially itself, when I take A1 intersection A2, I know intersection is the common part. So common part is the smaller one. When I go further, it's further smaller one. When I go further, it's further smaller one, and so on. So it goes on decreasing. And finally, you actually have nothing left. Okay. Intersection of an becomes empty set. Why do you have nothing left? Some of you might feel that okay, I might get something. But no. If you remember, you had some result which can help you prove this. Probably you learned that in the first few lectures of your real analysis course. So, does this sound familiar? Archimedean. So, there is a property in real analysis called as Archimedean property. There are a couple of equivalent statements. The important statement is n does not have an upper bound. Okay, that is one of the ways in which Archimedean property is stated. N does not have an upper bound. The set of natural numbers is unbounded from above. So we can actually use Archimedean property here to establish that the intersection is an empty set. Okay, how? Let us try. There are two basic methods of proving anything. One is proving by contradiction, second is proving by induction. Here I cannot go for induction because I want to make a statement only when I include all n's. I don't want to make statements for finite n. So I don't want to extend the result from 1, 2, 3 up to infinity. I want to talk directly about infinity. Okay. So what I am going to have is proof by contradiction. Okay. So proof by contradiction means you assume that whatever you want to prove is not true. So what I want to prove is actually this. So I will assume that it is not true. What do I mean by assuming it is not true? I would assume that okay, this intersection an is not an empty set. When I say that, it would mean there should be at least one element in intersection an. So we say let omega belong to intersection an. Okay, so there is at least one element, so that intersection an is not empty. Remember, we are trying to prove by contradiction. You shouldn't forget that. Otherwise, you might feel ma'am herself said that it is empty and now ma'am is saying omega belongs to it. Okay, so because we are going for proof by contradiction, this happens. Okay. Omega belongs to intersection an. What would it mean? It would mean that by definition, omega belongs to an for every n. Okay. Omega belongs to n for every n means omega belongs to 0, 1 by n for every n. Okay. So this means that 0 is strictly less than omega is strictly less than 1 by n for every n. I am saying strict inequality because we have open intervals. We don't have closed intervals, so 0 and 1 by n are not included, so I have strict inequality. What it means? It means that if I take reciprocal on this part over here, what I can say is n is less than 1 by omega, because anyway omega is positive, so it doesn't matter. So I am concluding n is less than 1 by omega for every n. So what I am concluding is basically this is an upper bound for set of natural numbers, because I am saying for every n is less than this, which is of course false, because we know that set of natural numbers is not bounded above. We know that by Archimedean property, and of course intuitively also you know that there is no finite upper bound for set of natural numbers. So this becomes the contradiction. Hence our initial assumption that omega belongs to union an, this initial assumption must be wrong. Okay, and hence we conclude that intersection an is an empty set. Okay, so we have talked about countable union and countable intersection. Now I have homework for you. So the homework is you have to try for one more countable union and intersection. We would define the set only slightly differently. So I would define an as closed 0 to 1 by n instead of open 0 to 1 by n. Okay, closed 0 to 1 by n instead of open 0 to 1 by n, and your job is to find what is union over an and what is intersection over an. That is your homework. Okay. Of course we are not stopping here, we'll do a few more things, but this is something we should remember. So this is homework. Okay. Now, we have to go for uncountable intersection or uncountable union. What do I mean by uncountable union or uncountable intersection? So I am going to define sets AT where T belongs to some capital T and capital T is an uncountable set. Okay, so some of the examples of uncountable sets are maybe interval. It doesn't have to be 0, 1. Every interval is uncountable. Or it may be simply set of all real numbers. Set of all real numbers is uncountable, we know that. Or set of all irrational numbers. Set of all irrational numbers. Q is for rationals, Q complement is for irrationals. Set of all rational numbers is countable, but set of all irrationals is uncountable. So my index set can be any of these, and I may define AT for every T in this capital T. Okay, and then I have to talk about their unions and intersections and so on. So whatever we did for countable can definitely be extended here. So I can maybe define AT as open 0 to 1 by T for every T in open interval 0 to 1. Okay, or it doesn't have to be 1 by T, it can actually be 0 to T also. Okay, what happens if you define 0 to 1 by T? Try to explore what would be union and intersection in this case. Similarly, if you change the definition slightly, so if you write down AT as 0 to T, then what happens? Again over the same set T in 0, 1. So try to see what are your unions and intersections in both these cases. Similarly, try to include the parts with closed intervals. Okay, so these are also some of the homeworks, unions and intersections of these, and unions and intersections of their closed counterparts. Instead of open interval, if you take closed interval, then what happens? Okay. Union and intersection are not the only operations that you define on a set. There are some other operations. So one important operation is complementation. So what do you mean by complement of a set? Remember, the spelling is PLEMENT, not PLI. PLI is for, when you are giving someone compliments. Whereas this complement is, you are complementing something, means you are kind of making it complete. Okay. So if this is my omega and if this is my, say, A, then A complement is the region outside A. Hence we say it is kind of completing A, because if we add A and A complement, you get the entire universal set. Okay. So this is A complement. Now, of course, we can mix these things. So we can take union over complements or complements over union. And you all must have studied in BSc your De Morgan's laws. Not in BSc, you might have studied in 11th standard itself, De Morgan's laws. So what are the De Morgan's laws? So if you have union over a n, let me say, and then you take complement over that union, that is basically equal to intersection of the complements. Okay. Similarly, you have reverse result, that is, if you take intersection of the n's and then take complement over it, it is same as union of n complement. So here I am writing in terms of ans, that is natural numbers, but ideally this holds for finite, countable as well as uncountable unions and intersections. So the De Morgan's laws hold for finite, countable as well as uncountable. Finite of course includes union and intersection of two sets also. Okay. Maybe try to solve, maybe try to compute unions, intersections of few sets and try to verify that this result is indeed true. Another thing is, you can actually try writing down a proof. That is also a good thing. I am not going to go into the proof here because set theory is just basic. It's just a revision. You have done all these things. We have to move from this to the definition of actual, something called as space. Okay. So I am not going to go into the proofs of this. Now, whatever we discussed about finite and countable and uncountable unions and intersections, we can use a common notation to denote all the unions and intersections. So we can define union over AT, T belongs to T. So it becomes finite union if T is finite. It becomes countable union if T is countable, and it becomes uncountable union if T is uncountable. Okay. So this is what we want to study about sets, their unions and their intersections. Now the next concept is sequence of sets. So what are sequence of sets? What was defined as sequence of real numbers? Sequence of real numbers, again ST101. That's why 101 is prerequisite for these courses. So sequence of real numbers is a function of 1, 1 on 2 function from natural numbers, set of natural numbers, to a subset of set of real numbers. So basically with every natural number you associate some number, some from real number. So what do you do in real sequences is, for every n you define some sort of fn, which is actually denoted by an. So it can be something as simple as 1 by n, or it can be something complicated as n cube plus e raised to n minus 1, something like that. So it is basically a function of set of natural numbers. So real sequence is defined as a function defined on set of natural numbers with outcomes, I mean the value of the function being in set of real numbers. So here I want to define a sequence of sets. So it is going to be similar. You define an as a set which is somehow dependent on n. Okay. Whatever we studied above for countable unions and intersections, those are actually sequences of sets. Okay. Now let me go back to that example. We had drawn a picture. So let us go back to that picture. Yeah, this is the benefit of not teaching on in an actual classroom over board, because I can't go back. Yeah. See, here we concluded that my A1 is the biggest set, A2 is smaller than A1, then A3 is further smaller, A4 is further smaller, and we go on. So the sets are kind of shrinking. Okay. So such types of sets or such types of sequences are actually known as monotone sequences of sets. Okay, they are known as monotone sequences of sets. So what do I mean by monotone sequences of sets? So let me first have a collection of sets which I would call as sequence of sets. So if I want to call it sequence, I have to have the index coming from set of natural numbers. Remember, it is entire set of natural numbers, not a subset of it. So if I have just A1, A2, A3, it doesn't become a sequence. It has to go on A1, A2, A3 and so on. Okay, so let this be a sequence of sets. Now we will say if, so we have situation like that. So A1 was superset of A2, which was further superset of A3 and so on. So if that is the scenario, then the sets are kind of getting smaller and smaller in size. So we call this as non-increasing sequence of sets. Okay, non-increasing sequence of sets. Why non-increasing? Basically they are decreasing or they are staying the same. Sometimes they may stay the same, but we are sure they are not increasing. Hence we call it non-increasing. If the situation is reverse, that is, if I have A1 as the smallest set, A2 slightly larger than that, and so on, we would call it non-decreasing, because they are now kind of increasing. Okay, so we would call it non-decreasing sequence of sets. So in general, a definition for non-increasing would be An is superset of An plus 1 for every n, and by transitivity you can say everything holds. So A1 is superset of A2, A2 is superset of A3 and so on. Similarly, the definition for non-decreasing would be reverse. So An is subset, this is subset. Let me write again. So An is subset of An plus 1 for every n. Okay, this is the definition of non-decreasing sequence of sets. So the set we defined there, 0 to 1 by an interval, that is actually a monotone sequence of set, and it is non-increasing. So any sequence which is either non-increasing or non-decreasing would be called as monotone sequence of sets. Okay, so monotone means your direction has to be same. So monotone sequence has to be either non-decreasing or non-increasing. Okay, so we have an example of non-increasing sets. 0, 1 was biggest, then 0, 2, 0 half was smaller than that, and so on. Your homework is to find example of the other case. Okay, so your homework is to find sequence of non-decreasing sets. Okay, in fact I will say in addition to that, if you come up with one more example for non-increasing, that is further good. Okay, now here I will stop.